Does it matter what stories we tell ourselves? That's what we're going to find out today. Today we're going to talk about the book by John Acuff, Soundtracks, A Surprising Solution to Overthinking. I've been a big fan of John Acuff forever, and he has a fantastic podcast, and I really enjoy it. I like his books too. He seems to be one of these level-headed people who has the right take on everything, and he talks a lot about perfectionism, how much perfectionism is hurting our lives. And he says in this book that overthinking is what gets in the way of everything that we want, that we think that if we overthink things, that we will be better about it, that it's making us better, making us think about things. And I will tell you, I am the world's worst overthinker. I mean, I overthink about everything. I overthink about what I have for dinner. I overthink about things in my shopping cart that are $3.45. I think about everything, and I think a lot about each thing. And he says that it's one of the most expensive things that we can do to ourselves, that overthinking causes us to just be in our own ways. And that if we could just stop what he calls a soundtrack, we'll actually be able to do the things we want to do. We'll get out of our own ways, and we'll be better at the things what we're trying to do. And he says that we, in general, don't realize the extent that soundtracks, that's why he calls it soundtracks, are just playing in our head over and over. You have a favorite song and you just listen to that song over and over. It can start to affect your mood. I noticed myself that when I play sad music, I end up feeling sad after a while, right? That's that constant music that's playing in there. Well, if you have a soundtrack in your head where you're just telling yourself, I can't do this, I'm not good enough for this, you have to realize or recognize what these thoughts are doing to you. And until you do, and until you can start putting in new techniques to get around these soundtracks, you're going to be stuck at what you're doing. And so that's really why he wrote this book. I liked, like I said, his perfectionism book, because there are people out there who are doing perfectionist things. But in this case, he's saying, what's happening here is you are running a story through your head all the time, this playlist, and your thoughts are aligning to them. And you don't realize it. You don't think about your thoughts falling in line with it, but they are. And so even if you're trying to get your dream job, you're saying, I'm probably not good enough for this job. Or if you're trying to do something like podcasting, you told me to be a podcaster, I'd say, well, I probably don't know what I'm doing in podcasting. I can't have a podcast. Now I have 4 of them. So you have these soundtracks telling you this. And he says that when you listen to these same playlists over and over, he says it becomes your personal playlist, which means you're just going to keep going to it time and time again. And so he calls them broken soundtracks because they're not true. They're not an actual reality of what's going on in the world for you so that you can depend on what is being said about them. He said that if you're looking at your soundtracks, what they do is that first you have to identify them. You have to know exactly what's being said. If you don't know what soundtracks are going on in your head and you don't know what they're saying to you, then you might not know how they're really poisoning whatever project you're working on. But he says, will lie about your memories. It'll cause fake traumas and then eventually real traumas, and cause you to sort of cloud the two together. And then it will force you into believing what it believes already. Now, I know we're talking about it in third person, but in essence, the stories you tell yourself, they might not be telling you the truth about it. Oh, I can't really do this. I remember, like I said, grew up poor, grew up in the backwoods. I didn't have much help that I could really, count on to help me get out of it. And I'm sitting there reading books, trying to learn anything. How can I get out of this situation? Meanwhile, I have my grandmother, who is in Chicago, has a whole different crowd of people in her life. Oh, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. Well, first of all, I don't think I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I thought, well, no way I'm good enough to do that. And that's where we start getting into those troubles. So then you start saying, oh, I'm not good enough for this. I don't know how to do that. I'll never get out of the situation I'm in. I'll never be able to do better than my parents, I guess, in this. Or you have a whole family of alcoholics. What's to say that you're going to hit 30 and you're not going to be an alcoholic? You end up in this rut. You always see that. I'm a biker. And so you'll see on biking trails, there's this little divot where there was probably softer soil and everyone just keeps hitting it. And then it kind of ponds up for a little puddle, and everyone keeps hitting it because they look at the rut and then they go right into it. And that's what happens with these soundtracks, is that we keep going and going and going. And he says that the problem is, first of all, when we have these memories that are telling us these stories, they might not be true. We misremember things all the time. There's a famous thing that I did with my friend where there was this boy we thought was cute in one of our classes, and he was a football player. We found out later he was a football player. And my friend and I fought. No, he had blonde hair. No, he had black hair. I mean, I remembered him almost entirely wrong, because to me, he was just the cute boy sitting next to us who I'm never going to get. And so my whole memory of him was wrong because I just didn't consider him at all, because he's a football guy and I'm just the overweight girl sitting in class next to my very cute friend who's adorable. So why even bother? If he's going to go for one of us, he's going to ask her out. I mentioned before how I took my driver's test, and I thought in my head, oh, you're failing this. This is terrible. Look at the way he's looking at you. He keeps writing stuff down. You failed your driver's test. And then at the very end, I whip into the parking lot. I parked diagonally in the lot, which wasn't a diagonal parking space. And he says, well, if you would have made this last park, I would have passed you. I had a whole conversation going on in my head that the guy actually rating me was not having. So our brains lie to us. They tell us stories. But then, like I said, they remember the past wrongly. I had a funny situation that when I was in high school, my friend said to me, oh, everyone loved you in high school, which was not true. But that was her memory, that everyone liked Jill because she was funny, or everyone liked Jill because I worked in the yearbook, so I'd come and take your picture and put it in the yearbook. My memory of it was everyone gave me a pass because I was in yearbook. They didn't ostracize me, but they didn't like me either. But everyone's image of it. So whose memory of this whole situation is wrong? My friend who thinks I was well-liked in high school, or my memory of it where everyone just wasn't mean to me because they knew I'd come to their class, take funny pictures of them, and put it in the yearbook? But unfortunately, our brains just remember things wrongly, and maybe we're both wrong. That may be the other alternative. And so then when we get into these traps of our brains telling us, you're no good at this, you'll never make this work, you always fail at this kind of thing, your brain is probably wrong. And that's the biggest thing, to take a look at it. And it's going to repeat these wrong messages to you. It's going to make you feel like you don't want to do these things, and then you don't do them, and then you don't progress in your life. I have someone in my life who told me this story. He just sort of made it sound like he can't do things because he can't focus, and he's not very good at things, and he can't solve problems, and so he can't get going in his life. And yet he plays very complicated video games. And I said, well, dude, you solved that video game, which is complicated. You clearly have the ability to plan, to carry out a strategy, to seek something and follow it through all the way to the end, even if that end is 6 months from now. Those are actual real life skills, even if it's in a video game. You have the ability to do it. People have this message in their head, which maybe they got from a teacher. I'm no good at this. I'll never be good at this. And so he says, John Acuff in this book says that neuroplasticity is what allows us to grow, to change our brain, to try something new and learn something new about ourselves even too. And you know what? They used to think that as you age, neuroplasticity ends, and it doesn't. It still continues on through every age of your life. And so you can keep going, and you can start playing those other soundtracks. And so he said that if you worry about, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to make that happen? If you tell yourself, I can't write a book, and you keep saying it over and over again, you're going to start believing it. Oh, I can't write a book. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm the world's worst writer, I think. But you know what? I just had to write something from work last week, and it was a charter for a project. And I used Grammarly, which helped me a little bit with the grammar, so that's a little bit of cheating. But you know what? I knocked this out, and my boss liked it. And I was worried that it was a short time frame. I didn't have very long to work on it. And I did it in a couple of hours, ran it through Grammarly, like I said, to make sure the grammar was correct. He had a few changes, maybe 3 of them. It was good. So he says that we have to stop worrying if we can and start being able to overcome doubt. he says that if we can continue to spin our case and get past the things we think are true and not true, we'll get over it and we'll be able to start doing this. And he said that some of these negative things that we have in our heads, one he calls entitlement, where you might say, well, I don't know why my boss has asked me to write this charter. I mean, there's better people for this than me, right? Entitlement. Or regret. Oh, I'm just not a very good writer. And my last job, I didn't do very well on writing projects. I'm probably not going to do very well on this. Fear. I'm not a good writer. I am totally afraid to write this charter. This is my first big project with my new job. And so I'm afraid that people are going to think I'm a dunce, that I'm not going to get it done. Or I could blame. Well, that other team asked for this. They wanted this. They wanted it at the last minute. I have no time to get this done. And then resignation. And you just say, oh, well, this is just how it's going to be. And so what do I do? How do I tap into getting past that soundtrack? And he says we have to retire them and replace them with new ones and keep repeating it until that is the new soundtrack in our head. And I sat and thought about it. I am Six Sigma certified. I had to do projects with Six Sigma that were charters. I've written charters before, and I passed my class, and the instructor of the class had nothing bad to say about it. You have good writing tools. You have Grammarly. It's going to help you through the part you're not good at. So I started telling myself this new message. You are the expert in the software. I was the third product support person. There are very few people in the United States that know more about this software than I do. Why am I worried about this? And I kept replacing it. And I just went through it and I did it. So he says that we have to start inserting new messages into our brains. And I think in my case, and what I think he's asking you to do is make sure that they're realistic. Sure, I'm not great at this, but I can figure this out. I can get this done. Let's just start with the parts I know. And so he says the first question we have to ask when we have a soundtrack going is it true? Well, is it true I'm a terrible writer? Yeah, okay. I'm not the greatest writer in the world, and it takes me a while to write things, which is why I don't enjoy it, but I can get through it. I'm not that terrible at it. I have good tools. So the question is it true? Then the second question he says that we should ask ourselves is this helpful at all? Why am I even telling myself this? Why am I even pounding myself with this thought? Because it's not going to help me do my project better. Like I decided to go rock climbing, and I'm going to go rock climbing, and the voice in my head says, oh, Jill, you're kind of clumsy. Okay, that is absolutely true. And is it helpful? Well, yeah, if I'm very clumsy and now I'm going to go rock climbing up a very steep rock instead of taking a beginner's class, yeah, it is helpful because it's saving my life. But in this case, is this making my project better by me just telling myself how terrible I am at writing? No. So it doesn't generate action. It doesn't generate me to make a different decision or go to a beginner class. If it was rock climbing, that's what I'd want to do. In this case, it wasn't even helpful. And then the next question he says is it kind? Are you even being kind to yourself? And you say, well, what in the world does kindness have to do with any of this? And the idea is that we do have to be kind to ourselves. We have a whole world out there telling us things we can't do or waiting for us to fail in some ways or another. We can be kind to ourselves and we can be nice to what we say. That doesn't mean, I think, in a sense that you have to inflate what your abilities are. If I said, you know what, Jill, you're a fantastic writer. You're going to do great at that. Well, no, that's not true either. But I can say you have gotten through big writing projects before. You know what you're talking about in this case. Let's just try it, right? And he says that what will help us get through all of this is resilience, because that's going to help us to do it again when the first time didn't go so well. If we do it again, we'll get better at it. And it's like podcasting. When I started podcasting, I was pretty terrible at it. And my first episode took 17 takes in order to get an episode out. And now I do things pretty much in one take. And for the first time, I'm doing this on video at the same time I'm doing the podcast, just trying something out. I'm better now. But why am I better? Because I'm resilient. I am trying to make this better. I am overcoming times when I was not so good at it and saying, let's try to take this up a step. My trainer, she's always pushing me just to do a little bit more. And resilience will help you to do that a little bit more. So those are some important questions that you have to ask yourself. What good is it doing for you in that? I think he gave kind of an example of parenting. But if you said, my husband wants me to take the kids to the movies, "Oh, I'm really terrible at it." Are you terrible at that? Probably not. You're a better parent than you think you are. Then the question, is it helpful? No, not really. Unless I realize, oh, sometimes I get short with my kids. We get in the car and they're noisy and I yell at them. Maybe we can find a different way to deal with the noise in the car than what I do. And is it kind? It's not kind to the kids because now I don't want to go take them to the movies. It's not kind to me because I think I'm a terrible parent. And it's not kind to my husband who is hoping for a couple of hours of free time at home by himself. I don't have a husband and kids, but you get the idea. What good is this soundtrack if it's not making me better in some ways or helping all of us in this project? What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start replacing all of these thoughts. We're going to have to retire these broken down soundtracks that are no good and stop thinking about them, stop going through them. But it is really hard to just stop doing something. So what you need to do is you have to have ones ready for you to replace it. When it came down to this project, I think, you know what? You're pretty creative. You find ways of getting things done. And whether it was this podcast or me getting myself through college or me figuring out how to buy a house or how to buy a brand new car, I figure it out. And so it might be stressful and it might be hard and I might make some clunky mistakes at times. But you know what, Jill? You tend to figure things out. There's a new soundtrack. And so you have to go through and start replacing yourself with new ones. I'm the kind of person who figures things out. Or I'm the kind of person who researches something and figures out how to come up with a better answer. So you start replacing them. And you're going to feel weird about it because you're saying something that you have not told yourself for a long time. But he says that you can start coming up and start replacing these messages. And he even says that you can do other things. He finds writing down lists of things that he has to do so he knows what order he has to do them are helpful to him. He likes to talk to friends and they help him through his soundtrack problems. One of the things that I do for me is that I tend to do something almost entirely different. Let's say I'm really stressed out about this charter. If I go do anything else different, go wash the dishes, play a video game, maybe read a book for a little bit or knit or something like that. Go get a drink and kind of walk around the house for a minute and go talk to the bird. That tends to help me. Just getting away from it for just a moment helps. He also mentioned taking naps. I tend to be that person that I almost wake up from naps in an entirely different mood. If I was in a bad mood before the nap, I wake up in a good mood. It seems like it rinses my brain of whatever it was that was making me in a bad mood. So you have to figure out too, are there interrupters that you can get to so that if you're running a bad soundtrack in your brain, what can you do to overrun it, break up its hold on you, I would say. And that might be a few minutes of playing video games. It might be, like I said, knitting or talking to a pet, playing with kids, something like that. And then he said that you should go around and start grabbing new soundtracks and you can pivot. So instead of saying, oh, I'm a terrible writer, this is going to be a terrible project for me, I can say, look, you know the software better than anyone else. This will be fine. So I didn't take on that one message. Instead, I pivoted it. You'll be able to get into writing this document. And even if you need a little help with Grammarly to help you get through it all, it's going to be there to help you get through the parts you're not good at. The next best thing he says to do is to work on just accomplishing something. As soon as you take action, as soon as you start doing something, then you're going to go, hey, this wasn't so bad. Or maybe you find an issue with it. Like say, ooh, I'm not sure how really to start off this charter. This software is a software that helps people in hospitals. And oh gosh, this doesn't sound good. I'm already starting out. I'm terrible at it. You know what I did? I started doing the parts I knew, which has to do with the pros of the software, the cons of the software, the risks involved in the software, where the project itself might falter if we go ahead with it. That stuff I know. So I started writing down that stuff first, and then I wrote the introductory paragraph last because now I got some paragraphs under my belt. I got the whole project done. Now I'm feeling kind of good about myself. Let's write the hard paragraph. So anything that you could do to take action on whatever it is you're having a soundtrack about will help you in this manner. So if you're, let's say trying to lose weight and you say, oh, I always lose weight for a while and then I stink at it and then I give up and it just stinks and I'm never going to lose weight and I'm always going to be at this weight. can you start with something that you're already good at? And so maybe you're not good at running, but you can get an exercise bicycle. That's pretty good way to start out. That's how I started out when I went to the gym, is I realized I couldn't run. But you know what? I got on the exercise bike, but then I noticed I get bored after 10 minutes. So then I did 10 minutes of the stair climber, 10 minutes of the exercise bike, then 10 minutes of something else, anything else. And I called them my 10s. And so when my trainer saw me at the gym, she goes, "What are you doing? Weren't you on the bike just a few minutes ago?" I said, "Yeah, I get super bored." So I overcome it by doing them what I call my 10s. I set my watch for 10 minutes and then I go find something else I might be more interested in doing in 10 minutes. Kept me from being bored and kept me in the place. But I started from a place of strength. Now I feel pretty good about myself. I got 10 minutes of biking done. Okay, now we're going to do the stair climber. Okay, we got 10 minutes of the stair climber done. What else can we do? So I went to the elliptical. So start with a place of action and a place where you feel, I think that you can knock this out. And then be very good at it. At one point, I had the stupid idea that I was going to be a salesperson for Dale Carnegie. And so I actually got the job at Dale Carnegie. And I was so terrible at this. And I had to call companies and say, "Oh, we have these seminars and we can send your people to these seminars and then they're going to be better, more confident, they're going to be better employees." And I was just terrible at it. So what I started doing is I started calling companies that I didn't think in a million years would want seminar classes. And one of them was funny. It was a portable toilet company. And I just looked in the phone book for companies that I knew would not be interested in this class thing at all. And I practiced on them essentially. "Hi, my name is Jill and I'm working for Dale Carnegie. And I'm wondering if there were a way that you could get your employees to be 50% better, you'd want to know about it, wouldn't you?" But I knew this toilet company is not going to want this class. But I practiced on something I knew, and I already knew they're going to say no. Do you know what, Jill? They're going to say no, but you're going to get some practice in there. And I got better at this. I never got good at it, but you understand what I'm talking about, is start with a way that you can practice, make some action on this, make some progress, and then start replacing your soundtrack. And he says that there's ways that you can take and flip what's going on and turn them into wins. And instead of looking at things as an emergency fund, turn it into an opportunity fund, reframing it. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know I'm big into reframing things. I like reframing it because I think it tells you a different story. So if you say I have an emergency fund, well, that's no fun at all. But if it's an opportunity fund, because maybe I will have the opportunity to go on a vacation or buy a new car. Now, I admit that if I were a financial planner, I would worry that the opportunity fund would be something I'd be more likely to spend than an emergency fund. But I think that once I got good at savings, and I was able to save for my emergency fund. So I think just having some success. Again, I had a fund I called the Adventurers Fund. So every time I did something when it came to exercise, money went into a fund so that I could afford a trip to go someplace exciting, like my 102-mile hike in England. And so we can take something that is a negative to us and flip it around and make it a positive for us. I told myself, even on this podcast, I'm going to do this for 3 years. I'm not going to quit for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I can figure out what I want to do. That was the end of it. I no longer was thinking, "Oh boy, so terrible at this. I think I'm just going to have to quit podcasting." Well, instead, I just told myself, doesn't matter. You're doing this for 3 years. And I did. He gave this example where he just sort of felt like he wasn't even breathing. He was so nervous about working on a project. So he told himself, "You've gone too far. You're now threatening not to be breathing anymore. Okay, too far." And so I've done that before too, where sometimes I try to bring things to an extreme example of it because I'm like, "Yeah, Jill, you're just being ridiculous now, right? I'm never going to lose weight. I might as well throw out all my clothes." Okay. Now you've gone too far. Let's just take a step back and a breather because now your overthinking has just run you into the ditch. And then he asked too, that if you're getting so much into the messages of everything, are you focusing too much on the problems that you're having instead of the solution? "Oh, I'm not good at writing. I'm terrible at it. I'm going to be awful at this. This charter's not going to be any good." Instead of looking at the solution, "Well, Jill, you pay for a subscription of Grammarly for your podcast. Pretty sure you could use it for work too." A solution, right? what a relief that is. So instead of trying to run yourself into the ground by going, oh, I'm never going to lose weight or I'm terrible at this, instead start thinking about what can you do to get through it. He says then the end is that you're going to have a new anthem for yourself. Those are going to be your new soundtracks and you're just going to keep repeating them. He talks about getting in the mirror and saying it to yourself in the mirror 3 times a day. When you get up in the morning, say, Jill, you're resilient. You think of great ideas and you get through problems through research and understanding the problem better. And every morning, get up and you say this. And I've done a few podcasts about having these kinds of messages because he says that these messages, when you start telling yourself in the morning, they're going to launch your day. And once you've launched your day, he says, then it's going to allow you to get your dreams because you are off on the right foot. So he really wants you to give this a shot. I think that if you're interested in more of this, this is a great book of how to get over your own mental voices that you have going on in your head so that you can start accomplishing the things you want to accomplish, getting the goals that you never thought were possible because somehow in your brain you're just telling yourself it's never going to work. So he says, you know what, just try it. Try this whole idea and start doing it. And you'll find that you're probably surprising yourself how good you are at doing all of this. And he says, if you're having troubles coming up with your brand new anthem, he says, listen to the soundtrack, gather evidence about yourself, and then start telling yourself the truth. I'm pretty honest about myself right now. I know the things I'm great at, and I know the things I'm not so good at. And so that helps me to understand where I'm going to have struggles. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to do a project because I'm not a very good writer. Instead, I'm going to understand, Jill, you learn the heck out of software. You'll know it better than anyone else. So you'll be able to come in and write up this project like nobody's business. And I can start telling the truth about myself. That is the truth about myself. But again, he says that if you don't know what to say, start researching it. Start gathering evidence. What are you good at? Where are you clever? Where are you smart? And he even says that, like, if you're interested, you can pick up a symbol that represents your thing. When I was a kid, I was interested in lightning. I was very obsessed with lightning. So I ended up having this little lightning thing that I put in my backpack. And it was this, I think I cut it out of a magazine. And it was just a graphic of lightning. It wasn't actual lightning. And I thought, that's what it is Jill, you can't do some things, but when you know what you're doing, just strike like lightning. Just get in there and do it and get out. And I knew for me at that time where I wasn't as resilient, I would give up too quickly, that if I could get in there and strike like lightning and get some progress in it, I'll be able to do the rest of it too. And so he says that if you're going to create a new soundtrack for yourself, he says first it should be simple. Second, it should be personal, meaning something very special to you, something about yourself, and then it should be visible. And that might be that icon, but it also might be something that you'll be able to take with you, print up, put in your wallet, stick it on your mirror in your bathroom so you can see it every morning. And that'll make everything a lot better. So I hope you enjoy this book. I think that if you, again, are having this kind of a struggle, there's no one better than John Acuff to help you into this soundtrack rewrite. And I really love the book. And like I said, I pretty much love everything he does, including his podcasts and his books. So my challenge to you is think of one area where you're telling yourself one bad message. Is there something that you constantly say to yourself? Oh, I'm just always late, or I'm just never very good at this. Think of something and see if you can't figure out a way to research your evidence and come up with a new soundtrack to replace whatever horrible message, which is a lie, it's not kind, and it's not helpful. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you listening to this. Remember, I'm just trying to work on my YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just starting to learn how to do YouTube, so I'm not that good at it. But you know what? I'm resourceful. You can go to abetterlifeinsmallsteps.com. It has everything I have right there. And remember, our walk to getting our goals and overcoming bad messaging starts with small steps and positive anthems.